a member of SASHA. I'm one of the board members. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background here about me. I was raised semi-religious. My parents, my mom is Jewish, my dad is Roman Catholic. They're both cancer researchers and scientists and medical doctors, and very much encouraged us to be inquisitive growing up, had a scientific mindset. I attended both Hebrew school and Catholic Sunday school on alternating weeks growing up, but ultimately my parents wanted me and my brothers to basically just decide for ourselves what we believed. I came to evangelical Christianity. I was saved when I was 20. For the next 5 years, I played professionally as a worship musician. And I decided during that time that if I'm going to make a career out of this, if that's what I want to do for the rest of my life, that I owed it to my congregation and my friends and myself and God to do everything that I could do to learn about Christianity, its history, what Jesus taught, what Jesus wanted us to do, just to be intellectually honest about it. So I never read the Bible cover to cover, so I read the NIV, which was the one that my church used. A friend of mine told me that the King James was the more authoritative version, so I read the King James. And then I realized this is not really the best way to go about doing that, just because they're both modern, or semi-modern, translations in English. And just because of the long history of these books, if I wanted to be serious about it, then I should read them in their original forms. So I went to the MU Classics department. I found a grad student who would tutor me twice a week, which I did for 2 years, learning Latin and Greek. And my goal in doing this was to read the originals of the New Testament. And I found out very quickly that you can't do that. It's impossible because we don't have the originals of these books. The copies that we have, the oldest complete copy of the New Testament dates to the 4th century. The first fragment that we have of any part of the New Testament is from the Gospel of John. It's 100 years older than the events that it describes. It's a fragment about the size of a credit card. These documents have been very heavily edited over the years. We know that they weren't written by eyewitnesses. We don't know who wrote most of them, except for 7 of the books attributed to Paul. And I just found it very difficult to maintain my faith that these were the actual words of Jesus, knowing about the history of them and knowing what I found out. So that was the beginning of my decline in my faith. And when I started learning more about the actual history of that era and about epistemology and secular ethics and anthropology and just how different cultures come up with their own religions, it just became more and more clear to me that Christianity was just one of another of a long line of ancient myths, and I stopped believing. It took me a year to come to terms with that and come out of the closet as an atheist. I knew I was one, but I was continuing to play worship music because all of my friends were in the Christian community and it was my job and I was just scared. But I finally was able to come to terms with that and quit the church and quit my job. And then I came here. So I discovered SASHA, which was wonderful for me. I really missed having a community like that of people that I could connect with. What I really like about SASHA, it's Skeptics, Atheists, Secular Humanists, and Agnostics. It's the atheist group organization here on campus. What I really liked about it is that, unlike my church, which was, I want to put this gently, they frowned upon me learning about the secular history of the New Testament and frowned upon me learning about this type of stuff and talking about it. SASHA was exactly the opposite. They loved me asking questions. They loved being inquisitive and just, in general, approaching things skeptically and wanting to understand how things really work. And that really connected with me. It's just something I'm very grateful for. So that's kind of my background. I also wanted to go over a little bit of the definitions of some of the terms we're going to be using tonight, just to set things up. So an atheist, defined very simply, is just someone who lacks faith in the existence of all gods. Most people, Christians, Muslims, Jews, are almost atheists. You guys believe in one God and disbelieve in all of the rest. I'm just like that, except that I also disbelieve in Yahweh. That's the only difference. So that's what an atheist is. An agnostic, there's a lot of confusion about this word. A lot of people, I think that agnostic is somebody who just hasn't made up their mind yet. That's not really what agnostic means. An agnostic is somebody who, it comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge. It's somebody who holds the position that it is not possible for humans to have certainty about the existence of a god or gods. So it's an independent question of what you believe. You can be an atheist and an agnostic at the same time. That's what I am. I'm somebody who, I agree with the statement, I can't be certain about it, but that makes me an agnostic. But in addition, I also don't believe that any gods exist, and that's what makes me an atheist. So the opposite of those, the opposite of atheism is theism, which means that you believe in at least one God, in the existence of at least one God. A Gnostic is somebody who claims 100% certainty in either the existence or non-existence of gods. So they would say, it's impossible, I'm wrong, I'm absolutely certain that there is or that there isn't. Most people that I've run into believe that an atheist is someone who says there is no God. That's not what an atheist is. That would be a Gnostic atheist. I've actually never met one of those. I'm not certain that there are any out there. So, let's see. Another term that we're going to be talking about tonight is secular humanism, or humanism for short. So a secular humanist is basically just somebody who thinks that the best way to approach morals and decision-making is with logic and reason, as opposed to divine revelation. And secular humanists also embrace social justice, feminism a lot of the time, things related to that, gender equality, and so on. Secular humanists specifically do not believe in anything superstitious or supernatural, so no ghosts, no gods, no prayer doesn't work, anything related to the supernatural. And then the last term I wanted to talk about is metaphysical naturalism. Secular humanists are metaphysical naturalists also. A metaphysical naturalist is just somebody who doesn't believe in anything supernatural. They believe that the universe began and operates in entirely natural ways that can be understood by the process of science and predicted, if not in practice yet because of technological limitations, then at least in theory. And by definition doesn't believe in anything that's supernatural, doesn't believe in miracles and so on. So those are some of the terms, and I think my time is just about up, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Dennis, and I'll see you again in the Q&A.
My name's Dennis. I'm an assistant professor in the Religious Studies department here. I'm sorry I didn't join you all for the icebreaker, but I had to get a couple of things done or I couldn't have joined you all. Interesting fact about me is that I once ate an entire package of Oreo cookies. Double stuff. I also was going to talk a little bit about definitional terms. I think that for me, one of the things that interests me as a sort of a religious sociologist, especially as of American culture, is there's a recent study that shows the rise in people who respond none of the above in polls. You may have heard of this. People are talking about the idea of nuns, N-O-N-E-S, and the role that they played in the last election. The idea is that there's a growing group of people, when they're responding to polls about what your religion is, they respond none of the above. And the question, of course, is, from a religious studies point of view, is how to parse out those nuns. Because in the media, the impression is that disbelievers, unbelievers are growing in America, and it's this sort of breathless sort of, are we becoming a secular nation, and it kind of confuses the discourse, which is a great opportunity for us to talk about it. But in the idea of nuns, the notion is that more and more people are sort of divesting themselves from institutional religions. And that can either be in the form of someone who goes from religious to not religious, right? Going from a theist to a non-theist, someone who is always a non-theist, or someone who is a believer but doesn't belong to any particular religious institution. And the problem is that nuns term lumps everybody together, right? And so it's interesting to think about the sort of the larger issue, which is the role of religious institutions in America and the role of churches, and what that means about where are we going as a nation, or is it a sort of a cyclical thing that sometimes religious institutions are very prominent in American politics and law and economy, and sometimes not so much. And we seem to be in a period where the power of mainstream denominational religious institutions in America is on the wane, whether it's just a sort of a cycle that will come back up again or not, we'll see. But the other thing is the idea of what an atheist is. And I think that there is a sense that in the discourse anyway that there's a spectrum, hard and soft, some people call it. I was reading an article the other day, they were referring to them as positive and negative. But generally speaking, the idea is that on the hard atheist side or the negative atheist side, there is a certain level of certainty about lack of a God. And that there are people like Christopher Hitchens and Dawkins who are famous for this sort of so-called new atheism, where they're going around or not Hitchens anymore because he's dead, going around and who knows what he's doing now. Going around and debating people of faith and bishops and scholars and theologians on the existence of God. Then there are soft atheists who are much more this sense of that it's not a matter of I don't believe in God, or it's not a matter that I believe that there isn't a God, but it as much as I don't believe that there is a God. And there's sort of a subtle difference there, but it's significant, right? That there's just something that just doesn't, it's not for me, right? Whereas I think the idea of theism and non-theism, I think is far more inclusive, I think, in terms of the atheist perspective, that some people believe that the possibility of a God or supernatural exists, some people don't. And that how you parse those out is sort of I don't know, something for us religious studies nerds. But the thing I wanted to really sort of focus on was the idea of secularism. That secularism classically means that there's a need to separate issues of church from issues of state, from religion and politics. And that goes back to Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius, Ibn Rushd, right? There are a lot of people who themselves were religious but believed that it was a dangerous thing to have religion and politics intertwined. And certainly the deists that were among the framers of the Constitution thought so, and that's why it's in the First Amendment of the Constitution. And so secularists can actually be religious people who are people of faith. And in fact, for the majority of American history, some of the biggest champions for secularization have been religious institutions. Because, especially in Protestant institutional memory, our sort of pilgrim creation narrative talks about the idea that they were here to escape religious persecution. But what we often don't talk about is that they're being persecuted by other Christians, right? For being the wrong kind of Christians. And so the notion that Christians, especially mainstream Protestant Christians, have long been champions of a separation of church and state, because they're concerned that there's an established religion, that their particular form of Christianity will somehow be defined out, which I think is a very real issue. And it only isn't until the rise of the moral majority in the late 70s or the 80s, Jerry Falwell, etc., that sort of creates this sense of urgency that religion is being removed from the public square, and that people are taking God away. And I think that language sort of persists now, that there's somehow secularists are trying to take religion away, and that's a relatively new position. And as a sociologist and someone that am comfortably sort of methodologically agnostic, sort of as an academic, that I can just look at these things and not take a position, right? It's safe for me to sit back and go, isn't this interesting? Rather than what I feel about it. But I do think that there is some sense that America has a deeply held secular history that's shared between people of faith and people for whom theism is not their thing. And that has always been there. It's only until recently that that's sort of become a thing. And humanism, finally, for me, the notion that the human person, the human genius, and human capabilities should be at the forefront of our concerns, not only to care for people, but also to appreciate what people can do also can be shared between people of faith and people who don't have a particular tradition. And so how you attribute your abilities and how you attribute things like scientific inquiry and things like that to the genius of the human ability or to some ineffable God, that's the question, right? And humanists tend to place that into some sort of real human realm. And I think that it's important to note, just and I'll shut up about it, that there are far more secularists in America than we give ourselves credit for. I think that there's some sense that especially with this rise of the nuns, that there's this small portion and they're getting bigger and bigger, but within the portion of people that reply in the positive, in the affirmative, what is your religion? Are you religious? Yes. What is it? Catholic, right? What is it? Presbyterian. That many of those people would feel like, well, we want to keep that out of the issues of state, right? We don't want the government to determine what the right Christianity is, because who knows if it's going to be mine, right? I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. That's a sort of not particularly marginalized, but a somewhat marginalized form of Christianity in America, right? Christian Science. What about Jehovah's Witnesses? That there are forms of Christianity that would necessarily feel somewhat edged out if mainline Protestantism were to be adopted. Catholicism would feel edged out as well. And so I think that there are far more people who are secularists in theory, anyway, than we give ourselves credit for. And so I think that it's interesting to think about the richness of the American religious landscape, given the fact that there is this sense of both and with regard to secularism. You can be a theist and a secularist. You can be an atheist and a secularist. And that's one of the areas that we can all sort of agree that there might be there might be some good in following Jefferson's idea all the way back to Aristotle, that these two realms should probably remain as separate as possible. Thanks.
Hey, my name's Katie. Before I really get into my own personal experiences with it, I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of background about myself. I came from California, and I was born in the mountains, California, like above the clouds, mountains, so, we got the hippie thing going on. And my dad is gay, my biological mother is transgender, and when we moved here to Missouri, they never really gave me any warning about how different it was going to be. So after they got divorced while we were here, they split custody. And whenever I was out at my pop's house, which is what we call my mom, which is in little Podunk, Harrisburg, very small country town, they started making me go to church with them. And this was my biological mother and my aunt. And so I was having to call them like mom and dad and go to church so that we would look normal. And so this was maybe first, second grade. That was the first time I'd ever really been going to church. So I hadn't been hearing these stories since I was a little kid, like a lot of other people had. And so I just didn't really understand them. It was like, I don't see how this applies to me. Some of these things don't make sense. I was a little skeptical kid back then, And then later on, when they started really talking about the morals of the Bible and stuff when it comes to specifics, I was like, well, why do you guys hate my family? Like, I don't understand this. And so I pretty much considered myself an atheist before I even knew that that was a word, because I just didn't believe what they were talking about. I really like the arts and crafts, though. Like, I'll give that to the church. I had a really good time with that. So that was kind of my, I guess, not really coming out story like Dave's. And so I've always been pretty atheist, and I think kind of agnostic too, because I have no idea. I mean, I'm a big science nerd in biology, so if you can show me, all right, that's cool. It just recently, actually, I kind of, I guess, came out to my family, because we never really talked about it before, besides the whole fake church thing. And I was talking about going to the atheist club. Why are you going to the atheist club? Well, I'm atheist. Thought you just kind of knew that. I'm like, really? You're an atheist? like, it was weird. It was kind of this mix of like shock and almost disgust that I don't really know where it came from, because I never really knew them to be religious until I said that I was an atheist, and then they started telling me all these like, oh, I like to pray and I have this God thing. It was like, okay, I don't know why you're talking about that to me, but I mean, the family experience was kind of weird. Not really knowing what everybody else in my family believed, and then having them kind of express that surprise towards what I believed. And then I got here, and I really wanted to have a group of people that I didn't have to hide myself from. I've had a lot of experiences with working with peers on projects or something where I can very obviously tell that they're Christian because they wear like a cross and they have some Christian CD in their car or something like that. And so I just don't bring up my religion. It's like, oh, I can't meet on that night of the week. I have a club. But I don't ever tell them it's Atheist Club because I'm so used to that just becoming a big obstacle between myself and other people. So I found Sasha, and it was glorious. And I think I searched for Pastafarianism in like OrgSync to find this club. If you guys don't know what that is, you should look it up because it is the best thing ever. Speaking of which, there are cupcakes that are decorated with the flying spaghetti monster, and you should eat them. So I guess, I don't know, I feel much more accepted in this club than I have by anybody else because, like some other people have been talking about, and I think might have talked about in the videos at the beginning, being around religious people makes me feel like they're trying to convert me, or they just don't approve of what I'm doing, or kind of like what Dave said, we're like, oh, you just must not know how you feel, or, oh, it's just a phase, you're a rebellious college student, and that's really insulting, so don't do that. And I like to think that I have a pretty solid grasp on how I feel about things with all these different experiences in my life, like hearing about the church when I was a little bit older, and so I already had some skepticism in me, learning that they pretty much just hate my entire family for really arbitrary reasons. I guess that's really shaped my view, and I'm very accepting of other religious people as long as you don't try and push it on me. And I think that's about all I have to say on that.
Hello. Sorry. My name is Robbie. I'm a sophomore comm major, and this is probably like my first semester doing stuff with Sasha. And I'm originally from Paramus, New Jersey. If you don't know, that's about 7 miles away from Manhattan. So my parents would take me to day trips to museums and art galleries and stuff like that, and it was really cool because I love science. I'm not studying science per se, but it's really just an interest to me, and I love it so much. And that has always stayed with me. I was raised Catholic, and I went to a Catholic school until I moved to Missouri, until I was about 10 when that happened. But I remember I never really had a coming out as an atheist. I never really had a realization that I was an atheist. It was just always a natural opinion for me. It wasn't that I realized that I didn't believe in God, it's just that I realized that people did believe in God, if that makes any sense. I remember I was in the 2nd grade, and we were at the Catholic school, so we had kind of those religion workbooks. And we had to write a little custom prayer, like a 3-line prayer, you did as a kid. And I remember the teacher coming back and taking me out of another class and bringing me back and saying, you have to redo this prayer. And I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but I must have wrote a question because she said you can't ask God a question. And that was kind of a red flag. Because as I understood it, God made everything, and He knows the recipe for supernovas. It just didn't really sit right with me. And, I mean, just things like that. And then I moved from Paramus, New Jersey, to Ozark, Missouri, which is around Springfield, down in southwest Missouri. They didn't prepare me for that either. I was raised Catholic, and there's not a lot of Catholics down there. And so no matter what I said, I could be an atheist, be Catholic, I'm still going to hell. you can't really win. And that kind of drove it. Not so much, because people kind of assume that, well, your Catholic education must have been kind of rigid or strict. It was very liberal. I was never threatened with damnation or anything like that. It was very much Jesus meek and mild. It was be good. And we never really talked about other religions. I mean, they were around, but it wasn't antipathy towards them. So that was quite the culture shock to learn that kind of fiery preaching that I heard from other Christians. I mean, it really wasn't that bad, though. I can't really complain. In exploring secularism today, it was on the flyer, and I think that's a great thing to discuss, because I think it's very important today. Not because of to sanitize religion or to take religion away from anybody, but simply because I think that the only way to really have freedom of religion, that everybody can do what they want in terms of practicing their own faith, or in my case, in our case, non-faith, is to have a system where there aren't laws in favor or in opposition to religion. I think like the doctor said, I think it benefits everybody, church and state, to keep them separated. And I think that's kind of what I think is more important than saying my atheism. I think saying my secularism is a much more important identity for me and an idea to put across. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Theo Tushaus. I am a sophomore here at Mizzou, social work major, French minor. I grew up in Savannah, Missouri, which is about an hour north of Kansas City. Tiny little town in the Bible Belt, so that was fun. My parents were, my dad teaches law at a university in St. Joe, and my mom was a science teacher, high school science teacher. And from a young age, they always taught me to be very inquisitive and very, question everything. They also took me to church twice a week, but not a very conservative church with conservative values, traditional values. It was a very liberal church. Disciples of Christ, I don't know if you guys know that denomination, but they're like, you can believe whatever you want and it doesn't matter. And so we did, so that was sort of my religious upbringing. And yeah, I really bought that for a lot of years, and prayed to God weekly, if not daily. Did that whole song and dance, went to church, really paid attention to the sermon. And then in high school, when I was about 14 or 15, I took my lessons that my parents had taught me to be inquisitive and question everything, and really sort of start to apply that for the first time in my life to what I thought I believed as far as religion went, and sort of figured out that I didn't really believe what I believed, and there wasn't, for me, a good enough reason to believe what I believed. And so I decided, I started questioning one week, and then the next week I was like, oh, I'm an agnostic, and then the next week I was like, oh, well, I'm an agnostic atheist, and that's where I've been ever since. It went like deist for like a day and a half, and then I was like, wait, no, that doesn't work either, and yeah. And I'm also gay, growing up in Savannah, Missouri, a little tiny town, wasn't really conducive to an exceptionally accepting environment. And so because of that, I was really afraid to come out to myself and to come out to other people, and I sort of didn't for all of ever until I got to Mizzou. And then I met a lot of new people, and I started going to Sasha. And Sasha was really awesome because, you know, I find people that I agree with in terms of religion, and I also find people I agree with a lot in terms of, you know, accepting people who are homosexual. And like, I sort of used that as a springboard to jump off of, because I think most people in Sasha would consider themselves, if not atheists or agnostics or whatever, then at the very least secular humanists, or at least share a lot of the ideals with secular humanists, a lot of feministic ideals, a lot of ideals that, you know, equality for everybody, you know, equal opportunity, and so I knew that, you know, no matter who I came out to and no matter how they felt about that, like, I could always fall back on Sasha and have a support group there to, you know, help me through that, and that was kind of awesome. And it turns out, you know, I didn't really need them because my parents were fine with it. My dad was like the sponsor of the LGBT group on his campus before he even knew I was gay, which was cool. And so, yeah, I am really happy that Sasha was here, and I'm really ardent about what I believe, and I love having religious discussions, and I think events like this are really important, and so I'm glad I can be a part of it. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Tony Lakey. I'm a philosophy and sociology major here. This is my 4th year here, but I'm going to stick around, take a couple extra laps. I'm the president of MU SASHA. This is the 2nd year I've been the president, I believe. And one thing I want to say, just as we're going, this is not representative of all atheists. I mean, there is no doctrine of atheism or pope of atheism. We just all kind of figure out our own thing. So while at Sasha, it is very much like Theo said, we all mostly have very secular humanist ideas, and it's got a very welcoming environment in that sense. It's not necessarily going to be every atheist you run into is also going to support feminism or LGBTQ issues or anything. But other than that, when I grew up Catholic, my family's Catholic, I grew up not knowing hardly anything about other religions. I knew there were Catholics like my family, there were other Christians who simply did church different, there were Jewish people who were just wrong about Jesus, and that was it. So it took, in high school, a friend of mine said that he was an agnostic, and that's when I've never heard of that before, so I had to go look it up, and I started buying books like Dawkins and Hitchens that were mentioned earlier, and then after I read stuff like that and reading things online and just getting more information about different religions, I came to the conclusion that it made the most sense to me that I couldn't believe in any of them. But I didn't know about atheists until that point. I didn't think people would possibly be treating atheists any differently or anything, but it unfortunately was the case. There was a conference we went to a couple of years ago, was it Skepticon 3, I think, out in Springfield, and there was this gelato shop that said that they were a Christian business and would not welcome any business from Skepticon attendees. That was probably the first time I really witnessed any discrimination against atheists, and I was really surprised by it. But I mean, not even that. There's granted smaller things, but even at work here, I work for the university, and my coworkers will wear like T-shirts from their youth group or church camps, and they're like crucifixes. Then like I'm asked to take off my A pin if I've got it, or from any of the organizations that I've been a part of. Like I've got a T-shirt that says "Science, Reason, and Secular Values" that I don't wear for fear of offending people. And even my boss has asked me not to wear these things. I mean, she's sympathetic. She isn't like anti-atheist or anything. But we get some of our business from other groups off campus, that if they're going to not have us set the things up, then that not only hurts me, but also hurts my other coworkers. So I wouldn't want to jeopardize the opportunities that we have simply by trying to wear my atheist bling, if you will. But yeah, so it's an unfortunate situation. But I think that Sasha is great. I was not the one who started Sasha. It started my freshman year here, And I was really excited about it because, like everybody has said so far, it's a great space where you can just be yourself and not worry about having to be judged. You can wear whatever shirts you want. You can be the person you are without having to worry about people judging you or treating you poorly because of it. So.
Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a doctoral student, just starting my dissertation, health education and promotion. Like Tony, I was one of the first SASHA members. And I'm not going to talk too long. I want to get to the Q&A. I like the Q&A better. But I did want to kind of add a little bit of some of my insights and experiences that I had. Like a lot of these folks up here, I grew up in a Christian household. And I wasn't really actively Christian until high school, and then I became very devout and very studious. I had a great spiritual leader, a pastor, who prepared us twice a week with a big, thick binder about all the arguments for biblical literacy and why Christianity was true. And then once I entered college, I believed that for a very long time. Once I entered college, I started to consider an alternate worldview, another explanation for the way things were and a different possible view of morality, how to be a good person, how to live a good life. And I think, like a lot of people, it wasn't just one question that was answered, or it wasn't one thing that I heard and thought, oh, that's really smart, I'm an atheist now. You know, it took years of building that alternate worldview side by side with my current worldview and evaluating them both. And I fought really hard for Christianity. I really, really wanted to believe that these things that I've been learning for all these years were true. So as David very articulately, unlike myself, explained, there's a sort of a process for all of us where we transition from less agnostic to more agnostic in the theist realm. So for me, it kind of became, at one point I was sort of an agnostic, but I reached the point where I was like 51% sure that there was no God, and so I had to consider myself an atheist at that point. And then I reached the point, where I eventually am more like 99.9% sure. So I kind of liken it to getting in your car when you drive. Most people here drive, I would assume. And you know that there's a slim possibility that you'll get into an accident and you'll die a horrible death. But it's just, you don't see it as very likely. And that was kind of one of the popular arguments for theism. What is the specific term for that? Where
Pascal's wager.
Yes, Pascal's wager. So it's better to believe, because what's the worst that could happen for believing? If there's a chance you could end up going to hell, then you want to hedge your bets on the one that doesn't send you down. So that's kind of the way I explain it to a lot of people. My grandmother died of cancer a few years ago. One of the last things that she said to me was that she was, her last wish for me was that I find Christianity again so that she would see me in heaven. And that was a very hard experience for me. Because I knew at that point that wasn't going to happen. And it was difficult for me to see her pass and not have the opportunity to kind of reconcile who I was as a person. And my coming out experience was very difficult. I came out to most of my family members individually, and there are still some who I have not come out to because I know we just not go over well, and we might never talk again. Not because of me, but because of how they feel. So that's kind of I guess that's kind of a bunch of people. I'll end on that very somber note. Sorry, maybe put anybody in a bad mood, but yeah. So let's start the Q&A.
Give a round of applause for our panelists, everybody. Just to give you guys a little background on our panel, the reason why we do our panel and we have such a broad array of people. Where can I stand? This doesn't do that. How about this? stand behind my panelists. The reason why we have our panelists, where we have people who are from different walks of that community, of the secular community, kind of speak of their personal experiences. And so all of the things said here tonight were from their personal perspective and their personal walks in that secular community that they operate in. And it's basically to show people that while they are from that secular community, that they are just human as the next person. I'm told all the time by my friends from the secular community, you probably operate in the regular business day with at least 2 atheists a day, or someone from a secular community, and you don't even know it. And so the whole purpose of this program is to kind of just break down those barriers and to realize and to gain that mutual respect for people from different communities, different orientations, everything, not just religion. And so that's kind of the purpose of this panel. And so now we're going to get into the Q&A part, the grit and the meat of it. And so hopefully you guys have questions for our panelists, and we want to remind you to be respectful of themselves and their individual and their stories, as well as the community. And fire away. I guess we can just do the raise your hand thing, and I can bring you a mic, and start there. So who has questions?
But I was just on what you just said about believing and like having a greater chance, even if it's not true, of going. I don't know. Did you answer that, or like how do you guys feel about that? Even if it's not true, if you believe it, maybe you have better, at least it's better to believe it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and as I was trying to explain, And as I tried to explain, and probably not very well, I do liken it to kind of, just getting in your car. And there's a chance, yes, I acknowledge the chance that, something bad will happen. But it's, to me, so extremely slim, it's not going to prevent me from, living my life in the more likely way. I mean, you never know anything for certainty, as Dave discussed very well with his explanation of agnosticism. I might step forward and fall through to the middle of the earth, and I don't know that for sure, but I don't let that guide the way I live my life. I don't live my life in fear of that, because I don't see it as a likelihood.
I mean, like, do you more so live in fear of possibly heaven and hell being true? I guess I'm saying, like.
You ask if you're asking if I am afraid that it will be true?
Right. More so, not so much of living your life in fear, but what if it happens to be true? Like, more so that way.
It seems so unlikely to me that I don't really, really I'm more afraid of getting into an accident in my car. That is, to me, far more likely than the existence of some after. I believe that it is more likely that there is a God who is maybe not the Christian God. It just is. It's just sort of a kind of an epistemological truth that the more specific a claim is, the less likely it is to be true. So the more specific a God you create, the more likely the things that you're saying about this God are not, quite accurate. So.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I just wanted to address what you were asking a little bit also. The classic response to Pascal's wager is what it's called, bet on the side that there is a God, just in case. The main problem with that, I'm assuming, just because this is the United States, and I apologize if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that you're Christian.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you, while you wake at night, worrying that you're going to go to hell because you're not Muslim? I mean, what if Islam is true? Then you're definitely going to go to hell if Islam is true, for not being Muslim. That's exactly how much, I can't speak for everybody, but that's exactly how much I worry about hell being real for the rest of the religions also.
Thank you, Dave. That was a good way of putting that. I have a question. My question is for Theo. I heard you say that you represent both community, the LGBT community and the secular community, and so I would just like to see if you could speak a little bit more about being from those communities, and maybe some experiences of how hard or difficult that might be.
it's a little bit interesting, the intersectionality between being gay and an atheist. A lot of people really assume, like they hear that I'm gay and an atheist and they're like, oh, is it because you had a bad experience with the church? Is it because Christians judge you and you don't like that? No, it's because, you know, I thought about my own religion and I had a very good, you know, well, yeah, I mean, I had a really good experience with religion growing up. Like, everybody around me was accepting, and that's not the case at all. I also, somebody, and I can't remember what I was reading, but I read somewhere online, and someone just put it perfectly, was that I feel, and I'm paraphrasing, but I feel more comfortable being a gay person in the atheist community than being an atheist in the gay community. Because a lot of, contrary to popular belief, a lot of gay people are very religious. And you say you're an atheist, you know, in a community of queer people, and a lot of them have the same reactions that, you know, that you expect from other, you know, more intolerant people. And so that can be a little bit hard. But what I really want to do with my life is just sort of break down all of those, you know, work to break down all of those stereotypes and for both communities. So yeah, but as a whole, I feel much more accepted in the atheist community, which is interesting because I identify a lot more with the LGBTQ community. So
thank you. I'm coming.
Just a quick question. Is everything in atheism, is it all evidence-based, a belief? Because I'm sure there's an argument I'm sure you get all the time that not even science can explain everything. So there's something maybe you can clear up.
Let's take this one.
So atheism just means that you lack faith in God. There are hundreds of millions of atheists in the world, I'm not exaggerating, who are religious but not God believers. Buddhists are a great example. It's not all Buddhists are atheists, but you can believe in doctrine and other supernatural things. For example, Buddhists believe in deities, ancestral spirits, and all this, but still be an atheist. And the only thing that atheism means is that you lack faith in God. You can, most atheists that I know are also basing their worldview on evidence and on science and have a higher regard for science and the scientific method, but that's not, you don't have to view things that way to be one.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to me that they're mutually exclusive. Right? That there are a lot of people who are very devout who also are scientists. Right? And so I think the difference is that there's the possibility of an answer out there. I mean, the one reason, I mean, I'm different on here in that I'm coming here as an academic, and that the idea that that atheism is broader than what a lot of people think it is. But one of the things I do think is true, that it is kind of an evidence-based kind of idea. Right? That there's a sense of faith, belief, and these kinds of terms that from an academic perspective are really untenable, very difficult to deal with, right? And so it makes much more sense for someone who's evidence-based scientist to think in terms of, well, eventually we're going to be able to figure that out, right? And the concern is that people of faith will have what's called a God of gaps, right? The places where you can't scientifically prove something, that's where God is. And then science figures out a way to prove that, and then God gets a little bit smaller, and so the idea that those things are really separate, right? There's a lot of evidence for faith-based people, miracles, right? The way I feel, that they would see that as evidence too.
Sorry. The way I see it is, if there was some way to prove all of science wrong, like you could easily prove evolution wrong if you found, say,
Tyrannosaurus Rex bones, like in your backyard, and that's an exaggerated example, but if it happened, it would prove evolution wrong. If that would be true, it wouldn't prove religion right. So they are somewhat different to me. The way I was raised is with science. I mean, learning about all the way the world works, but then I was told about God or religion, and when I learned about science first, so it confuses a lot of children to see two totally different things. But for a lot of, like Dr. said, a lot of people are religious people that don't. Not every Christian is a creationist. Not every person who's Jewish believes that the Old Testament is true verbatim. So there's so much overlap and exclusivity that, I mean, I'm not sure. You can really only ask people on an individual basis. Like Tony said, there's no hope or doctrine of atheism. So you need to meet. Yeah, it's really individual based.
Okay, you have a question over here?
I'm also an atheist. I was just wondering, like one of my friend's parents is trying to get him to go back to church, you know, even though he's atheist, just for the community basis of it. And then over in England, they were talking about having like an atheist sort of church, so you can have that community. I mean, I know you guys feel that Sasha is like your community, but would you ever consider going to a church to have that sort of like huge, like citywide basis, or is that just like a complete no?
I like that you remembered the point about Sasha being our community, because if I were to do something like that, it would be just a larger version of Sasha, because I would much rather be able to be myself with the people that I feel care about me, like these people up here. Even though I don't know you, I think you care about me too. Rather than pretend in something just for the sake of going to church and having that connection, because I wouldn't really believe what I was pretending, and I wouldn't really feel like I was part of it anyway. I mean, I kind of see that as like, oh, well, if you were back in Nazi Germany, would you pretend to be a Nazi so you could be socially accepted? No! Like, that's just not how it's going to happen.
We should come up with a better analogy next time.
One thing I just know of is like the Unitarian Universalist churches, and I know like St. Louis even has the St. Louis Ethical Societies. They're all our communities, somewhat similar to a church community that aren't inherently religious if his parents like really need him to do something. But I mean, I don't know that I would think that's necessary, but or just join a group like this because it's awesome.
I still do sometimes make a venture to church when I'm back home because, I mean, I grew up with the people there, and that's something I think is really important to realize is that, you know, not the only thing like that a lot of people think that they have in common with people in their church is that they believe in the same God and you go to the same service. But I mean, you know, these are the people who, to an extent, raised me, you know. I grew up with some of the people in the church. You know, I still like to go and see them. They know I'm an atheist, and I mean they don't care. And I sit on my phone and text during the sermon. But like you know, it's fun to go back home and see those people. And I don't go every week. I go like once a month maybe. But as far as that, like joining a new one, I wouldn't go probably to a new church. I'd go to a group like this. Yeah.
And I share a lot of your sentiments, Theo, with that. I was very close to my church community, and when we actually moved away before I became an atheist, but that was something that, you know, I tried to look for new church communities when I did move, and I never quite found one that clicked like my old church family. And especially when I became an atheist, I really felt that there was an absence there. And when we were starting Sasha, that was one of the things that the founder and I talked about a lot was that hopefully this would be like a community, sort of a church family for people who didn't have that anywhere else. So I guess you were asking about the idea of like an atheist church?
Yeah, over in England they started one, and there is a huge debate on that right now.
Yeah, I actually think that's a great idea. I had it a few years ago, just sort of, but I would love to do something like, just to have, that sense of community and family again in my life. People who are doing something positive as a group.
One more quick note. The only problem I would have with something like an atheist church is I wouldn't want it to have somebody setting up telling you what to believe or this is the way you need to act or anything like that. But I mean, in terms of just the community aspect, I think that would be a fantastic idea.
I just had like half a comment on this. I just realized that I would love an atheist church because I think we would get to sing songs about evolution, and that would make me really happy.
Any other questions, guys?
Hey guys. Oh, this is heavy. Anyway, and you guys are like found of faith, or as we say, non-faith. And my question for you is, what advice would you give to people who are stuck in between, who are not exactly sure which way to go? They kind of live in one, or kind of live in the other.
So James Luther Adams, the Harvard theologian and divinity professor at the divinity school there, once said, he's paraphrasing Socrates, God doesn't want unexamined faith. And I would, as advice to somebody in that position, say step into the doubt. Read as much as you can from both sides. Read about other religions. Read holy books, as many as you can find. And ask questions and find a local group like Sasha. And a lot of us went through the same process. We have some members of Sasha who are religious and are just curious about this stuff. But I think being inquisitive is a great thing. Having the value of knowing, of knowledge and of learning. So, yeah, my advice to somebody in that position would just be learn as much as you can, and then you're in a better position to make a decision about it if you decide to make a decision about it.
I would say to someone who is on the fence, go to seminary school. Because they actually acknowledge a real problem in seminary school where people who go to seminary school quickly convert to atheism. Because the more they learn about their beliefs, the harder it is for them to accept them. But I would just kind of echo what Theo says. Be very inquisitive. Don't be afraid to argue with people, especially on the internet. People are doing that all the time anyway. And challenge your beliefs, challenge other people's beliefs, and you can only grow from it. Try and do it civilly. Don't be a troll.
I'll say one more thing. Then I think we're done with the question. But it's also totally okay not to have an opinion about it. I mean, if you don't really know how to feel about it, then that could be your opinion. I mean, it's a big question. It's been haunting people for thousands of years, so you shouldn't feel pressured to make a decision about it. If somebody asks you, be honest and say that. I don't know about you, or if you're asking for a friend or whatever. I don't want to assume you don't know anything, but it's totally fine to be saying I don't know.
I just want to throw out one. Dave actually wrote a really great blog post a couple weeks ago called was it How to Convert Me? How to Convert Me. And it was a really good look at the arguments that you need to be prepared for if you want to engage in somebody who's educated about that subject, which way do you want to sway religiously. So I would encourage you all to check that out.
Okay. Elie Wiesel, Jewish Holocaust survivor, wrote in his book Night that basically his spiritual man died in the Holocaust. And someone who was raised in the church and whose foundation is basically built on faith, that kind of made me sad a little bit. So I want to know for you all, what is your foundation? What gives you promise for the future, and what keeps you going after you feel like the world is kind of crashing down on you?
Be very brief. So it would be my comment. For me, it's personal happiness. I think that all people have a biological imperative, basically, to pursue happiness. It's what our brains are designed to do. And if this is the only life that we have, then we need to live it the best we can and find out how to live alongside with each other the best we can.
Yeah, for me it'd be a lot other people. I want to try and make the world a better place daily. I strive to do whatever I can to make people more accepted, more accepting.
I think some tenets of secular humanism come in on this one. Humanism, by definition, you think that humans are really incredible and can do a lot of things, and secular humanism, you don't necessarily need a God for human to explain how humans can do incredible things for one another. So for me, like where I'm founded is I think we're an incredible species and an awesome social, unique organism, and I want to work to help us get along and thrive and grow and understand each other, and that's where I'm at for my foundation.
I hate to sound like a broken record, but yeah, that's really it. I mean, I love people, and people love me. What else? I mean, no, I mean, I need to help people who are close to me and loved ones, and they want to help me. So, I mean, that's all I really need to get through the day.
I think you can come at this not even just from like a faith perspective, but even just in, say in high school when you're trying to get through the whole like navigating social relationships and romantic relationships and feeling like you've got to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever it is you want to have friend. And I really learned to rely on myself after a lot of failed relationships, and I think that made me a lot stronger. And then I was able to also rely on my friends, and I take a lot of strength from how much they rely on me. And I feel like having a really strong social connection with really close people is what gives me personal strength and looking forward to the future with these people, as opposed to necessarily like placing that kind of strength in an outside figure, if that makes sense.
Is anybody counting how many times we say community or reference it? Because that's
as far as what gives me strength when I'm down, I mean the same thing that anybody could say. My family, my friends, Sasha, my pets. We're just being honest here. There's so much to live for. Learning about science, it's fascinating to me. I love learning, reading, playing music. The same things that make life worth living for anybody. Atheists are people too. It's the same things. Family, I think I said that already. You don't need a supernatural source to have meaning in your life. I think a lot of people think that because that's where they're used to placing the credit for the meaning in their life. But it's not necessary, and my life is full of meaning as far as I can tell. I think that about covers it.
Hi, I know a lot of you said that you're starting off in Christianity or Catholicism. Have you ever decided or ever thought to study indigenous religions, maybe of like Asia, Africa, the non-Abrahamic religions, and did you still feel the same or?
When I was in school, one of my majors was anthropology, with an emphasis on cultural anthropology. And I've studied the Yanomama of South America pretty extensively. And I've read the Quran, and I've read the Upanishads, and I've made it a point to learn as much as I can about other religions. So, I mean, within reason, there are thousands and thousands of them. It's definitely my decision to come to atheism. I don't really feel like it was a decision. It's more that I realized I was an atheist. It wasn't just rejecting Yahweh, the Abrahamic God. It was learning about all the different religions in the world and realizing that, in the United States, we call Yahweh the one true God, or religious people do. But in other places, they say, well, that is a myth, and our religion is the one true God, or however they phrase it. And when you look at it, stepping back a little bit, you realize, well, everybody thinks that everybody else is a myth. The ancient Greeks, we call those myths now, even though at the time that's the gods that they believed in. And as Sam Harris likes to say, the mass grave that we call mythology, where all the dead gods are. It's definitely a process of looking at all of the different religions and systematically rejecting belief because you don't find evidence for them.
I just would sort of make a little bit of a commercial for mythology. Because I've studied the world religions for a living, and in particular indigenous religions, and one of the great things about the world's traditions is that there's so many great stories. There's so much wisdom of ancients, of people that have encountered virtually every kind of situation that you can imagine, and have written stories about it, and have sort of encoded moral and ethical values into stories, into songs, and into dances. That it's all a stage of beauty, right? And so the idea that to me it's like whatever your personal belief is, whatever you consider your foundation, that there's always room for some sort of informative story or song or dance or art or something somewhere else, right? And so rather than, I'm thinking of myth as being not untrue, but rather a different kind of truth, right? Mythologies are sort of truly true, or truly false, I guess, right? That they're untrue in ways that are really true, and that those kinds of things you can hold a proposition without having to seize it, right? You can hold it and then let it go and hold another one, right? And I think that that's one of the things for me, is that rejecting the notion. I'm just sort of, I've been somewhat disingenuous. I happen to be an atheist, but I don't like to talk about it, because to me it's, when I'm in front of a classroom, I don't like people to sort of peg me, right? Already, you're going to do that too. Oh yeah, the first day, that's what that guy's like. But since I'm among friends, but it's come at me for a long time. Both my parents were California Indians from the same mountains you're from. And that the stories and the dances and the songs, they still have meaning for me, even though I don't believe that Coyote actually jumped up and grabbed the moon. I don't believe that Frog and Weasel are cousins and that they had some sort of an adventure together. That these stories are great stories to think with, but they're just stories, right?
I didn't come from a Christian background, but I did decide to study other religions. I haven't done it quite as in-depth as I want to, but it's kind of been a slow process for me. So I decided to just take classes on them here at the university to get some of my honors credits. And I went from taking medieval Christianity one semester to the religions of China and Japan the next semester. And it was really awesome. Like, I really like learning about these things. And I think that a lot of the morals that I learned about are things that I already hold really close to my personal view on how I should live my life. I just don't necessarily believe in some of the more supernatural things that they do. But I think that it's not only important so that I can be culturally sensitive, but it's also really fascinating to me to learn about what other people have thought at different times in different places.
Religions are just really interesting, because if you look at all the different religions across the planet that I personally think that were made by people, it tells them a lot about those cultures. It says a lot about what they hold dear. You can take a lot of the virtues and ethics and morals of all kinds of religions, and like you said, you don't have to believe in their claims. You can help a stranger thinking about the Good Samaritan story without believing that Jesus is your Lord and Savior. So, I mean, I have actually thought when I was in high school of converting to different religions, so I looked a lot of them up, and I saw the same kind of things that were wrong with Catholicism in other religions. So that never happened, but I think everybody should be well versed in other religions and other cultures, especially if you're atheist.
When I became an atheist in high school, I sort of was of the opinion that if I'm gonna not believe in any gods, then I should, learn about other religions. And so I did. I read the Tao Te Ching, which if you haven't, it's a really interesting read and doesn't take very long at all. It took me all of an afternoon. The Upanishads and the I can never say it right. Hinduism's Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, that one. I can't say it right. I thought I had to be all well versed in various arguments against religion and against theism. And I read something. I think by Daniel Dennett, and you don't. To be an atheist, you don't really have to do that. I think it's good to, but you don't have to do that. You can look at the premise of God and say, I don't buy this, I don't believe in this, and there's no evidence for it or any others, and that's it. And I think you can pretty much universally apply that to all forms of theism. But as everybody here has sort of said, studying mythology, and I've studied a lot of mythologies too, Greek and Egyptian and Sumerian, and learning those stories is really interesting, but it's not necessary for being an atheist. So.
Okay. I'm sorry to interject, guys, but what we're going to do is we're going to break here so we can fix the room, but I want you guys, if you have questions, to track down these awesome panelists and have one-on-one with them. And also I want to thank all my panelists for participating and being able to share your personal stories, and if you guys could give them a round of applause, that'd be awesome. And thank you all for coming to my book, Your Book, Their Book, No Book, and stay tuned for other CDI ambassador events. Thank you.